Palais de Chaillot came representatives from many lands. It was the 4th Congress of the General Assembly of the United Nations. As individuals, delegates greeted each other as old friends. As representatives, they were soon to be divided by conflicting national interests. For in this, the 4th year of UNO's existence, the tangle of world problems was as complex as ever. 4 years after the greatest war in history, reconstruction was still the keynote. For many of the world's peoples, a decent life was still only a promise for the future. In matters of bricks and mortar, there could be little dissension. But in the political means of reconstruction, there lay bitter differences. Differences which threatened the whole process of world recovery. In the Republic of France, so recently freed from Nazi domination, strikes, stoppages, and mob violence. In China, Greece, and the East Indies, the torment of civil war. Across the red rust plains north of the Yangtze, the Chinese Nationalists retreated before the advancing communists. The story of the nationalist armies was one of defeat, surrender, and oblivion. But as yet, the guns still thundered, and China's agony dragged on. Yes, in its 4th year, UNO had much to face, and the Paris Assembly felt the tremors of discontent.
I interrupt. Shall I speak to the people? Shall I speak? Will you let me? I pass the word to the people.
From the public galleries came the voices of unofficial delegates. The interrupters were removed, but for the statesmen, the world's problems remain. Speaking for the British Commonwealth, Australia's Mr. Menzies said,
"Don't tell me for one moment that we British people have no interest in the reconstruction of Europe. Twice in this century, we British people have been involved in devastating wars which came out of Europe and came out of European conditions. The close family development of our own immense empire resources is not inconsistent with the development of Europe or with the development of any other group of nations. It is, on the contrary, sir, complementary to such development."
12 million square miles of the Earth's surface. This is the area covered by the British Commonwealth, a family of nations with common ideals. Paris saw one international conference, London another. To Downing Street came ministers representing peoples of every colour, race and religion, delegates to a British Commonwealth Conference. First of its kind since the war, the conference was convened for informal meetings, for the exchange of views on matters of common concern. Here, diplomats discussed foreign relations, chiefs of staff discussed defence. But perhaps the most important talks of all were those devoted to matters of Commonwealth economics. In the Commonwealth lies much of the most productive land on earth. From its grazing lands come huge yields of beef, pork, mutton and wool. From its grasslands and forests, wheat, cotton and timber, sugar, rubber and tea. Its mountains and rocks are mineral storehouses. Oil, copper and manganese, tin, diamonds and gold. But though rich in material wealth, the countries of the Commonwealth were starved of manpower. Putting Australia's case, Mr. Beasley said,
Australia has 7.5 million people. Britain has more than 48 millions. This is a very big difference, and Australia feels that the excess of population in Britain should be redistributed among the other countries of the British Commonwealth. We are certain that it will strengthen the British Commonwealth of Nations as a whole.
For the first time since 1938, the British Parliament was opened with full dress ceremonial. It was a touch of tradition in a time of great change. For among the measures before the new Parliament was one to bring under public ownership those companies engaged in the production of iron ore, pig iron and steel. Since the Labour government's election in 1945, many of Britain's key industries have been placed under the control of the state. Coal, hundreds of mines and thousands of miners were now operating under the flag of the National Coal Board. Power, a host of electricity stations and gas works generated Britain's power as a publicly owned service. Transport, thousands of miles of railways, lorry lines and bus routes were now run by a government ministry. Aviation, 3 great air services, British European, British South American and British Overseas, flew as public corporations. Now it was to be steel, an industry whose output was vital to the productivity of the whole nation. One more step in Britain's program of planned economy. But whether the method was right or wrong, Britain's recovery depended upon production. Production demanding every man at work the highest possible output per man. For only by increased production could Britain reach the high targets of her vital export program. In the Commonwealth were resources upon which the whole family might prosper, but little manpower to develop them. But could Britain spare that which she so urgently needed for herself? On the solving of such problems depended the closer unity of the family of nations.